Leaving an abusive relationship doesn't mean the pain or confusion instantly stops. And you may be wondering, is this going to hurt forever? And why is it still hurting after I've left? And if that's you, then this episode will be perfect for you today. Because in today's episode, we've been joined by a clinical psychologist, Krazi Kirova, who has worked extensively in trauma recovery and mental health support. Together, we're going to be exploring what helps survivors heal, what research tells us about recovery after abuse, and how you can start to gently rebuild your life after leaving. Welcome, Krazi.
Hi, Laura. Hi, Lynn. Happy to be here again.
Hello, Krazi. Hello, Laura.
Welcome, Mum. Before we get started, Mum is not your lawyer. Krazi is not your psychologist. I'm not a lawyer or a psychologist. And so we always recommend you get your own advice in relation to this, or mental health, legal, whatever, because each situation is different. And you may feel triggered by listening to this. And if you do, please call 13 11 14 Lifeline. And if you are experiencing any kind of family violence in Australia, you can call 1-800-RESPECT and get connected to the right people. And if you are, of course, in danger, please call 000 or whatever the number is in your country to get immediate help if needed. So let's get to the jingle and let's get started.
Hello, I'm Laura, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
Welcome, Krazi. Welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back and talking to us again. We absolutely love the information you provide and helped so many people the last times you've been on. And if anyone hasn't listened to those episodes, I'll put a link in the show notes. But we were more than happy to have you on today and again in the future to talk about recovering from abuse. And I think it's a really important topic.
Yes. And thank you again for having me as well, because it's so nice to have this big platform and for me to be able to speak about the things, not only in a room one-on-one with one person, but to share that knowledge and that support as well on such a scale.
Mm-hmm. And we have so many people who listen to our podcast who are going through what best be described as hell, going through the divorce process, going through the family court, going through mediation, whatever. But on top of that, they're also struggling with the after effects of the abuse. Yeah. I guess, Krazi, what helps? What can they do?
Well, let's start from the very beginning, because it is the divorce course. So supposing that a lot of the listeners are exactly in that stage of the separation and post-separation process. And the reality is that the abuse very often does not end at that stage. In fact, it tends to get worse and it can last for quite a while, pretty much as long as all the legal systems, all those channels can be used as well. So even though you may have left the relationship where you are being abused, the abuse is still going on. And we know that for recovery and healing to start occurring, the most important factor is that there needs to be safety in the environment. And when there is still post-separation abuse going on, we're not really talking at that stage about healing and recovery yet, because there is no safety. And the safety, even though maybe physically you might be safe now because there is a distance and you're living somewhere else and maybe your address is not known, the emotional safety is not there because there is an ongoing communication, there is ongoing proceedings occurring. So I very much like to always speak with my clients and really to validate and reinforce to them the idea that don't feel like you should be fixing yourself right now. Don't feel like you should automatically be feeling so much better and feel like a new you. In fact, the opposite is quite true. They feel even worse because they're coming out of this relationship absolutely depleted and exhausted and suddenly being faced with all these institutions ahead of them. So we are not yet talking about healing, but there is an immense sense of relief as well at that stage, I think, that slowly really takes shape and takes hold because you're starting to have a lot more autonomy in your life, a lot more freedom. You're no longer walking on eggshells all the time at home. You're not.
Yeah. And I think that when people leave that kind of relationship and eventually they're free from it and they're like, yes, I want I want to get my parenting orders. I want to get my property sorted. And I want my mental health back in a good way. And then they push themselves and like, why am I still not okay? Why? And is there something wrong with me? Am I crazy? The questions that must run through people's heads when they go through this after they've left.
Yeah.
So that's really good to point out that it's not an immediate thing that's going to happen. And it can't happen until you're safe.
No.
Emotionally and physically.
No. And in a way, the way I like to think about it, you can't even yet fully see what the damage has been done either. Because it's in a way you're still in the hurricane, and when someone is still in the middle of the hurricane, you can only see what's exactly in front of you and around you. You don't have the bird's eye view, you don't have the big perspective yet. And people do experience an incredible amount of emotional, neurological, physiological depletion when they're in these relationships. And it takes a long time to kind of start recharging back the batteries after.
Yeah.
And it was good that you pointed that out, Krazi, because we were just talking on an earlier podcast about how sometimes the victim is pushed into mediations and signing agreements and agreeing to things, and they think they're out, but they're still in the grip.
They're absolutely still in the grip. And again, there is so much research happening nowadays on that idea of post-separation abuse, and there is a very strong recognition that it is a very real phenomenon. It's occurring very frequently, especially when we talk about coercive control, which is a predictor of over 90% for post-separation abuse, and that it escalates. It escalates the abuse. It doesn't even stay on the same level.
What does the research say about it? What are these people expecting to happen to them?
Yeah. So we, first of all, and I'm not even so much talking about the research, I'm talking about my personal observations and experience, is that the recovery process is quite closely tied to how the legal proceedings and how all of that goes. I mean, the more intense they are, the more difficult they are, the more overwhelmed you feel, and the more it still keeps you in that place. And once things start settling down a little bit, you're kind of over the hill when you start seeing the end and the light and things are starting to fall in place. That's when that relief starts coming in. Also, people just get accustomed to it. It's a big shock in the beginning. You don't know the language, you don't know what to expect. And it takes a while to learn it. And once you do start learning it, it does get easier. And also you start feeling the benefits of just not having an abuser around you and everything that comes with it.
We had an episode called The Narcissist Playbook. And it was just from people we've met and clients I've met. And it talks about all of the things that you can expect. And I found that if people had an idea of what was going to come, and then when their ex did something and it was in the book, like it was on the list, they go, oh, okay. And it's less frightening for them. You must see that all the time.
All the time, and it can be very predictable. I have the benefit of having seen these things play out time and time again. My clients don't. So sometimes we'll talk and I say, well, I bet you this is going to happen, or I bet you that's what they'll do. And sure enough, it does. So once they start saying, oh, this is actually quite predictable. Yeah.
We had someone write in the other day, actually, who said that they've been listening to the podcast, and I'd suspect probably one of the ones you've done too, Krazi. But she said she's had a journey from every message she gets, every letter, legal letter she got, everything would make her want to vomit and cry, and it would ruin days of her week. But now she's at a place, she's still going through it, but she has a bingo sheet with her sister. Yeah. So she actually says she uses the bingo tag and goes, oh, what is he going to write to me today? And instead of the email giving her that horrible roller coaster feeling, she now crosses it off the bingo sheet and has a little laugh. So I guess even though some people are still in the thick of it, like you said, Krazi, that once they get used to it and they can identify the behaviors and look at it, I had someone describe it to me, look at it like a scientist. Oh, that person is doing that now because of this, as opposed to being in it. You take yourself out of it and look at their behaviors. Yeah. And I think that does help. So,
well, it's a psychological strategy as well, which is called reframing. When you reframe a situation, so rather than this is something incredibly scary that's going to happen, you reframe it, oh, there's just that useless noise again that I have to put into a jokey way. And that's when the situation no longer is what it used to be.
Well, it loses its power. Yeah, it loses its power.
Yeah. And the person loses their power.
Yeah. And Mum, you were saying the other day, like we had someone in our Q&A member group and and they're very scared. Oh, my ex has threatened to take me to court again. Like the threat of being taken to court can really scare people because court seems scary. But Mum, you knew of this person's situation and what that person had done. And you said, what did you say? I can't remember.
I can't wait until he's in front of the judge. You'll do much better once the registrar gets a hold of him.
Yeah. So that's that reframing, I guess, again. Instead of going, oh my gosh, they're going to take me to court. My whole life's going to explode. Oh, they're going to take me to court. Good luck with that because the judge is going to give you a can of whoop.
And the threats become evidence. So you've got your threats, and thank goodness people do it by text message, Facebook now. Yeah, so you can keep that, attach it to your affidavit, point to them, and the court has got a much better handle on coercive control and post-separation abuse, I think. I don't know if that's your experience, Krazi, with your members, but they've tried anyway.
Yeah, I've been reading quite a lot, and I can see it actually coming through even in the psychological standards that have just the new psych standards that have come out this year. They have finally included recommendations for specialist training in family and domestic violence, which I can tell you is not part of the core training whatsoever. And it's probably difficult to find for a psychologist, but now at least it's recommended that it is. So I think there's definitely increased awareness and actions towards that way,
Have you found anything else with working with your people, Krazi, about that journey of trauma recovery? Have you discovered anything else?
Oh, so much stuff. I mean, we have a whole hour to talk about it. I was only starting from the very beginning because I think it's important to also lay out what is it that someone is recovering from? What is the impact? What are they going to be dealing with in order to know how recovery is going to go? And I do want to make a few points about what can be expected completely normally as the impact of emotional abuse and coercive control. And the really important points to make are that it's very expectable. These are not pathological or abnormal reactions. They are very expectable results that people, any person, regardless of their, mental state and so on, are going to have to abuse. And these are very cumulative impacts, meaning that the longer this thing goes on, the more it's going to be felt. There is a difference between someone being exposed to abuse for 1 year compared to someone experiencing it for 10 years. It's going to have a very significant toll on the person. It does result in, like I say, very significant physical, neurological, and emotional depletion, where you're just kind of running on empty by the end of it.
Have you seen that? I don't know if you are on TikTok.
No, I'm not.
But they call it the post-divorce glow-up. And you see these, they do like a before and after, and it's while they're with their ex videos. And they look like zombies, like they've been in a makeup costume and they look drained. They look really like, and then you see a year, 2 years later, the glow-up, they call it, and holy moly, they look like completely different people. And it's like someone's injected them with an IV drip and given them 10 years of their life back and given them a makeover or whatever. I don't know what's going on, but they always look amazing. And it's called the post-divorce glow-up. And if you are feeling right now, as you listen, quite sad after this podcast, go and watch some of those. It might make you feel a little better.
I love it.
That's great. But it's interesting because while you're in this kind of relationship and subjected to this kind of abuse, it does cause that depletion. And then it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. Because of the depletion, you no longer have the ability and capacity to resist what's happening to you. And there is a psychological erosion that is going on. And that supports the status quo that actually keeps people stuck in that relationship. And people don't have the energy, they don't have the belief that they can come out of it, but the reality is very different. Even though it might be hard in the beginning, and I think, Lynn, you said it as well once, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, whereas if you stay in there, it's a different story. So yes, it's difficult in the beginning, but it pretty quickly starts going the opposite way and people start finding themselves, start reconnecting, and we'll talk about, and I'll tell you what the research says about what are the factors that really help recovery. But yeah, it's a matter of time and most people get there.
That's a lovely thing. That's a lovely thing to say, that most people get there. And between, Laura, the sad, drained human, and because we glow from within, if you haven't got your spirit glowing inside, your outside reflects it. And self-care can go out the window as well. And then this beautiful post-divorce glow-up person. But on the way, you should celebrate the small changes as well, because it's like a flower finally being allowed to blossom.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not on TikTok, so I haven't seen the post-glow there, but I'm in the therapy room, and what I see is quite often I'll meet my clients at their worst moments, right? I see them, but I don't know who they were before that because I haven't met them at that stage. But it's amazing how we'll be doing our work and I'll know them along the way. And in a couple of years, it's like there is a different person coming into my room. They're no longer whatsoever the person who came in. There is a completely different, alive version of them. Version that's smiling, that's having a new job, that's having all this incredible social life and, just going on trips and adventures that never seemed possible. And you just realize there is the real person underneath what was done to them.
Yeah. Sad.
Yeah. How long? So I don't know how long's a piece of string, but because I know people can leave and then I've heard of this where the voice or the sentences or the words that were said to them, they're still in their head. So even after they've left, they still might have their ex's voice saying, no one's ever going to love you, or who's going to want a single mother of 4 children, or whatever they're going to say. And that's going to sit in their heads. How long does it take to get that out of their heads?
I mean, again, this is so individual because we're talking about each person in each situation. How long were they in the relationship? How bad was the abuse? What internal and external resources do they have once they leave? Are their children still involved? Do they still have contact with that person? There's just so many factors going into it that I would not overgeneralize by any means. But what I would say is that, first of all, research definitely says it's a process. It doesn't happen within 6 to 12 months. And it's also what's called a non-linear journey. So it's not a constant sort of line where we're going up and up. It's very kind of up and down, up and down. So you might have better days and then you might be triggered by something or something will happen and you really kind of have a slump. Then you kind of come out of it, then back again. And multiple processes are happening at the same time. It doesn't happen. First, you manage to work on your sense of self and worth, and then you move on to your physical health, and then you move on to new relationships. It doesn't work in consequence. All of these things could be happening at the same time, but they will be happening differently for people.
But what do people do? Like, the only things that I've ever heard is meditate, like go for a walk, join a gym. That seems to be a very popular thing to do. The physical bit is like the first thing people seem to be able to. They know, okay, I should look after myself. But looking after myself seems to be physical because I guess we don't know how to fix our brains. Yes. So what kind of things should people be doing if they're listening today? What would you say are the best things to do?
Yeah, many things. And this is where I am going to get into the research because thankfully there have been several studies, not too many because it's not an easy thing to really be researching. And a lot of it is qualitative research, which means that it's come out from conversations with women and that being analyzed rather than questionnaires and data from many people. But there are about 8 tasks that have been identified. They're quite consistent through the different research.
I love a list. I love a list.
Okay. So,
this is something I can get into for everyone. Okay, let's get started.
So let's get to the very first task is, like I say, establishing safety as much as possible. No healing happens if there is no safety. And that would be different for obviously different situations and people, but having as much physical distance from the abuser and as much little contact. If you can go no contact, perfect, because not everyone is having to deal with children and divorce proceedings. If going through all your passwords or your devices and really changing lock cameras, just having safety plans, but that's quite important. So establishing that safety. And safety is also about financial safety, of course, having a place to live. If you have to stay with people for a while, thinking what access to money I'm going to have for a certain amount of time, all of that falls under this. So this is the number one kind of task in the logistics you have to think of before we're even talking about healing and recovery.
Can I just put in there, Mum, for kids, if they do have kids, what's the best, safest legal way to set up some boundaries possible, but still be able to do the right thing by the kids?
I think for a start, most people would be forgiven if they went a couple of weeks without the children doing more than a phone call or so forth. So in those few weeks that it takes you to get basic safety, if there was abuse, then the children are also likely to be victims of the abuse, either having witnessed the family violence or also walking on their own eggshells. So it doesn't hurt for them to have a break. But then you might want to move on it depends on the age of the children, but you might want to move on to maybe phone contact. I wouldn't recommend video conferencing because that can invade your space if they move the camera around. If there is a risk of abuse, you may think that maybe a supervised contact centre would be the right way for the children to see the person. Because if it was bad enough that you've had to leave for you, chances are that the children also need to be given that grace. And Krazi, I was thinking, someone said something once, I don't know if I read it in a family report or in a study, but someone said, if you've been abused, every time you have to interact with your abuser is like a re-abuse.
Yes, absolutely, because so much history, so much memory sits behind it. And what can look like a very innocuous interaction between two people to an outsider, they could literally politely say hi to them. But if this is an abuser and already this brings up all the memories, all the unpleasant moments, all the fear that you've experienced, then you are sitting right in the middle of that trauma all over again. So that's absolutely true, which is why I was saying minimum contact, especially if there are no children involved and you don't have to. I very strongly encourage, at least for a while, until you feel stronger and you pull yourself together and you can actually be more assertive in your communication, then just give yourself distance and a break.
And there's those My Family Wizard and Our Children is an app, so you don't have to talk or text your ex. And that's another way you could set that up. All right, what's number 2?
Okay, number 2 is what was termed in the literature education and re-examination of the relationship when you now know about the dynamics of abuse. So this is really...
That sounds painful.
But very necessary.
Yeah.
So it really is about educating yourself about what went on, what happened. So what is emotional abuse, psychological abuse? What is coercive control? What is manipulation, darvo, gaslighting? All of these kind of things we take for granted. And then sort of taking that knowledge and really applying it to your own experience and realizing this thing happened way before I even, had the words. This strategically was already occurring. These are the things I lost along the way. This is how it started getting a lot worse. Sometimes these relationships can be quite good for years and then change, and people really struggle to understand, looking back, when did it really change? When was it like that from the beginning? Did the other person really change? So when you have the language and the knowledge about it, then you can make sense of it. So making sense of it is one of those components of healing.
I think we did that episode with you, Is It Emotional Abuse?
Yeah.
And we got a lot of messages from people going, wow, I've been able to put words to what was happening to me. I'm able to name my experience. And the minute people figure out, oh, that's what was being done to me, you can see that they change. So they're thinking, I'm not crazy. I wasn't crazy. This was happening to me. And they were doing this. And you're right. Once people figure it out and they can see it and they can name it, it gives them a bit of a power, because they realize, oh, okay, I was put into a situation.
Yeah, it allows...
And this was happening.
Yeah, we have a saying, name it so you can tame it.
Like that.
Which is, so you're trying to tame it, but also naming it in a different way gives you another perspective. It gives you another story. It wasn't, I wasn't good enough for this person, or there is something wrong with me. They didn't treat me well. They did this. And that's a whole different kind of story. And from there, you can start dealing a lot differently with shame and guilt and very common feelings that you're coming out of. So this is kind of number 2.
Yeah.
Educating yourself.
Name it so you can tame it.
Yes, name it so you can tame it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. What about number 3?
Yeah. So now,
Need to start doing your disclosure but have no idea where to start? Feeling overwhelmed about mediation coming up? Or just trying to deal with negotiating with a manipulative ex? Then you need to go to thedivorcecourse.com.au to go to the free resources section where you can get a mediation checklist, a disclosure checklist, a word salad, read a letter like a pro checklist, and also a before you go checklist. Get ahead of the game and be organised and ready, as this handy checklist, along with the accompanying episodes of the podcast, will be perfect for you. All you need to do is go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and go to the free resource section and download the free checklists today.
number 3 is starting to rebuild your identity. When we talk about emotional abuse in a relationship, really what is key to understand, it's not so much about what is being done to you, it's about what is being taken away from you. It takes so much away from you and so much from what makes a person themselves, what makes you. And so when you come out of these relationships, very often people really forget who they were. They will literally say, I feel like a shell of the person that I was. I don't even remember what I used to like and what hobbies I had and who I was before that. It's been so long. And so starting to find yourself, starting to rebuild your preferences, your kind of needs, your opinions, your wishes, your wants. That is a process, and it's a very necessary one. It can take quite a long time, but that is one of those tasks, rebuilding that sense of self. And so even sometimes I'll get kind of clients to almost make a list of what are things I like and what are things I want to do, because they forget what their preferences even were.
Well, I think anyone who's listening today, that's a good thing for you to do, to sit down and have a little think. What do you like? Because I know, Mum, you say, if you've got your own space now, decorate it the way you like it. Make it all pink if you want, or whatever. And someone wrote in and said, I actually didn't know what I liked. I didn't know how to decorate. I didn't know what my favorite color was. Like, there was a whole lot of rebuilding that needed to be done there.
Yeah. And even who were you before you went into this relationship? What did you used to hope and wish for then?
Particularly, I find if you go into a relationship very young, you're still kind of forming. And I think a lot of people tend to mold to fit the more strong person, probably the abuser, in the relationship.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
What an adventure to be on. to refinding yourself. It's like you're being a teenager again. Like, okay, so it's a good idea to sit down and like really think about what do you like and explore that. And see if you like knitting, see if you like ice skating, see if you like dancing. Find some stuff out.
Yes.
Do some extracurricular stuff.
And also rebuilding your identity, not so much through the eyes of the person who abused you, because you know how I said once that word perspecticide, someone literally kind of killing off your perspective and starting to define you. And now you get an opportunity to define yourself on your own terms. Am I really a nagging person or a controlling person, or am I actually completely the opposite? I'm a caring person and I'm a free-loving person, which is very different.
A thing on Facebook yesterday, it was an Irish lady, and she told a lovely story. But at the end of the story, she said the moral of it is that the eyes of a friend make a good mirror. And I think I'm holding that to my heart, but I think the eyes of the eyes of an abuser are not the way that you should see yourself.
They're like a distorted mirror. That's how they reflect a very distorted reality. But because they become the only mirror you can look into, then all you see is a very distorted version of yourself. And now that version and that mirror is no longer there. You're not either going to have any mirror, or you're going to have to find your own, and you're going to find a different version of yourself. So that is that idea of rebuilding identity.
Okay.
What's next?
Moving on to the next.
Yeah. So what's number 4?
Okay, but in no order of relevance at this point.
Okay.
Relevance, important.
Because this is all happening all at the same time.
Yes, they're all
over
happening.
the place.
They all need to kind of be happening at the same time. So the other one is rebuilding social connections. That is an extremely important one. We know that one of the biggest aspects of these kind of relationships is the social isolation that comes with that. And when people come out of these relationships, quite often there's very few people left around them. Family might have pulled away because they've been pushed away. Your friends may be very few, far in between. You may or may not have work colleagues, depending if you were able to work, all of that sort of stuff. Your self-esteem is down, so maybe you don't even have the confidence to go out there and make new friends. So it really is about starting to reconnect. And not only reconnecting to people, but being quite selective. Research very clearly shows that at this point, people are very selective about their friendships. They really don't have almost anymore the time and the energy for bad friendships or people who don't believe them or judge them or they're not very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
So it is about picking the few or more good people in your life and really letting them in. Giving them the time, letting them be helpful. A lot of people really want to be helpful. And I know from my clients, there is the sense of, I don't want to be a burden to people. I don't want to put this on them. Let them. You're not going to be a burden. Let them come and help you. This is what friends are for. Let them do their job. And this is what family is for. Yeah.
And that's so right.
Krazi, I think that I've seen situations where a person in an abusive marriage may sometimes be made to choose between their friends or family and their marriage. They feel like I either save my marriage or I keep up my friendships. And it might not have been overtly spoken, but there's definitely that influence. And then at the end of the relationship, when you come blinking out back into the sunlight, it can be hard to accept that you were part of pushing them away, your friends, and they might find that hard as well.
Yes. But I think if you are able to talk with people when they really understand the background and what was going on, people are very, very understandable. But I would also say the reality is not everyone is going to understand what you've been through, and that can be very painful. And this is where you don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to convince everyone. You don't need to explain the dynamics. If someone really is not getting it, don't waste your time.
Yeah. And if you've got friends that are supportive, loving, caring, helpful, there's no point wasting your time on friends that are not supportive.
No.
And my main concern, I think, which is what I've seen a couple of people I know, they go straight into relationships though, not friendships, into dating.
Yeah.
And tend to sometimes find the same person, but just in a different body who does the same stuff. Is that something you worry about?
Yeah, well, that came up in the research. That is one of the tasks.
Let's talk about that then.
Let's go there. Yeah. So it is about determining how you enter new relationships. And the key here is that it needs to happen very intentionally. It is very normal and in fact advisable that you refrain from going straight into new relationships because there is no time to really make sense of what's happened. There's no time to start rebuilding yourself or to really take stock of where you're going and what you want to do. So that's why it's not really advisable to do it straight away. But also, to be fair, a lot of people have lost any trust in humanity at that point. It is actually very difficult to imagine that I could ever trust enough someone to enter a new relationship. And so it is quite and perfectly valid if someone makes the opposite decision that I am just completely going to stay away from relationships for a long time or to take quite a bit of time off. But that needs to be a thought out process rather than an automatic sort of knee-jerk reaction of jumping into the next thing.
Yeah, I do see people, they just go, I'm going to put you on Tinder or whatever, Grindr or whatever those ones are. I'll put you on now and it'll make you feel better. If you've got friends who are listening or if you're going to share this with anyone, sometimes not a good idea to jump straight into that.
But I've seen too over the years that in quite bad relationships, very coercively controlling or even physical violence relationships, the only way a woman can leave is by starting a relationship with someone else who saves her.
Well, that is a reason possibly for leaving or kind of causing the crisis in that relationship that kind of causes a change. Now, whether that other relationship is actually one that lasts or kind of takes, so I think that's a different story.
Yeah.
It may happen, but it's more likely that was just an external sort of reason and motivating factor to change things.
Yeah.
What else should people
Another
do?
one is really embracing your newfound freedom and power. So embracing autonomy, embracing the ability to be able to make decisions. One of the very big things that are being robbed of someone who's exposed to abuse is their decision-making power and their autonomy and freedom, right? And sometimes it takes a while to remember that you do have that now. You can make these decisions and you should be making them and make the most of them. There is no bad repercussions necessarily for what you're going to wear and how long are you going to stay out with a friend. You don't have to navigate a grumpy partner. So do it. I've seen one of my clients, I remember the first thing she did when she left a very abusive sort of ex-partner was because he would make her only wear dark, usually black clothes, and he wouldn't allow her to wear dresses. So the first thing she did was she went out and she bought a whole bunch of bright colored dresses and she only wore them. And that was such a great sort of statement, but that's also such a good example of starting to exercise now your autonomy and your freedom.
And I think I heard of one lady who wasn't allowed to cook. She was told she was a bad cook. She wasn't allowed to cook. And so once she left her partner, she started cooking again. And whilst she wasn't particularly a good cook, she enjoyed it because it was her freedom, and her friends and family supported that. And I do hear of people who, even after they've left the relationship, they come up for decision makings that they've never had to make before because they were never allowed to. Years after you may leave the relationship, you'll be asked to make a decision, and that person may go, "Oh, I've actually never made that decision before because I was never allowed." So there's some education there may be needed for people financially. If you've never been able to touch your finances, if you don't understand how all that works, you can go and educate yourself. And so you can make these decisions confidently, feel really good about stepping out there and doing stuff you were never allowed to do.
Yeah. And I guess a sub-theme of that embracing back your freedom and power is starting to make goals and set goals for yourself. That is quite important. Starting to look towards the future and to think, okay, do I like my career? Do I think it's time to switch it up? A lot of people at that stage, they will start taking a new course. They might do a complete career change because they realize time is too short and there's things I've changed as a person and there's other interests that I want to do now. One of my clients, when she kind of ended that whole separation process and the legal proceedings were done, and she suddenly at age 55 decided she wants to go on a 6-month trip to France because she'd always wanted to go and study French. And, this was so unusual for her, but she landed and she went and it was just the best thing ever for her.
Oh, that's lovely.
So these kind of things, having plans, having goals, motivating yourself for the future. Yeah.
Wow, this is making me want to cry because this is the nicest episode we've ever done. It's all about the good bit at the end. What other things can they do?
So two kind of smaller things, but also important. One is accepting that recovery is a process and it will take a while. When there is this sense of it needs to happen quick, or I need to fix myself, or I need to get this done, and when there is this unrealistic expectation, then that in itself can really pull you back or make you unsatisfied with your progress. So when you have this kind of attitude of acceptance that this is going to take a while and that's completely normal and just take it day by day, as an attitude that is a lot easier and that helps recovery.
Why then, Mum? If it takes so long, why then, and I'm not blaming you, but why do the courts and the family report writers and all of these stories that we hear put the focus on the person who's left the abuser's mental health and says, "Oh, but look how crazy they are now," or "Look at all the help they need. They should be better now. They've left the abuse."
Okay.
So if that's that, why?
Okay.
Why?
So I'm really proud of the family court system in Australia, particularly now. I know that every judicial officer, registrar, all of we lawyers and the contact centre staff, we have all had some trauma training. And so we are finally recognising it. I think I've always known it, but the judges never realised that they came in at the end of the story or in the middle, of the story, rather than looking at the whole relationship. They've just come in at the end and go, look at that. And now that people are trauma-informed, that's what the court has emphasised, that everyone should be aware of the process and what happens. And I have seen a couple of cases coming through, Krazi, where if a judge didn't get it, doesn't understand, then they get appealed and the full court wraps them over the knuckles and sends it back for another judge. So I'm very optimistic, but I always am with this. But I'm just proud to be part of that system again. I think some of the solicitors could do with some more training, but our listeners, I think, they educate their lawyers, don't they, Laura?
Yeah. So are you saying that the changes are happening and they're filtering through, but they might not fully be full through because they're still having to appeal and get in trouble from the big judge?
It seems that some judges haven't yet got the memo, but they are really intensively training and in training us as well. And that's what I'm saying with the contact centres where people undergo supervised time. It wasn't, I think, uncommon for the person who was supervising a parent's time to become slightly more pro that person with whom they'd spent an hour watching them on their best behaviour with their child, compared to the person who dropped the children off, who was probably sobbing and anxious and make sure this and overwhelmed. So we were getting reports from the contact centre for people who really had no idea. So the court has also the government's also legislated, and it's now in the Family Law Act, that you don't get reports from those sort of people, okay, unless they've got their trauma informed. So I know it's hard, and it has been hard in the past years, but we really need to celebrate the victories as well. And
be hopeful.
Absolutely.
And if anyone's listening and they're not being listened to, then they do have those to talk to a lawyer, but you've got the option to appeal.
Yeah.
And hopefully the full court will give whatever judges ignored your abuse, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. There was that case. There was a case very recently where the court, Sayed and Raymond, where the primary judge failed to provide adequate reasons for ignoring family violence, and where he failed to give consideration to the mother's evidence about family violence, and the court just overturned the order and sent it off again. Okay. So we are seeing it at the high levels, and I know the Chief Justice is very focused on this.
Okay. All right, Krazi, what's the last little one?
Okay, the last one is the idea of healing mentally and physically as well. Like I say, there is a lot of fallout from these relationships, and even basic things like starting to go regularly to GP or doctor appointments. I'll give an example for one of my clients during pretty much the whole relationship was not only not really allowed to go and visit a doctor when she felt she needed because she didn't know what her own body, but also she was made to carry the children for very long times, and it really damaged her knees. And so finally, when she was out of the relationship and she finally was able to freely go and spend the money on her own health, it turned out that she needed to have operation on the knees very urgently, and there was already quite permanent damage done because it hadn't been addressed earlier. But I guess that's an extreme case, but I'm illustrating that idea that care of your health in all the kind of normal ways, start paying really attention to it, because quite often that is compromised. And I think that's where that going to the gym and the mindfulness and relaxation and all of it comes under. Whatever works for anyone. To be honest, it doesn't even have to be anything as intense as that. Going out in nature, going out in hikes, giving yourself some alone time to spend in contemplation in a park. All of these things can be very nourishing for the body and the soul. Therapy can be very useful at that point as well. So that's healing yourself mentally. There is a lot of feelings that will be remnant, a lot of things that you want to talk about and maybe you can't even discuss with friends, or you need that extra perspective and knowledge. So that can be quite helpful. Body-based interventions. I've talked in the past again about even things like body-informed yoga. One of my clients is starting to do a martial arts, trauma-informed martial arts course.
Trauma-informed martial arts.
It's in Melbourne. There is such a thing. Yeah. But things like EMDR therapy, there's different things for different people.
And you could get in touch with your spiritual side, where whatever religion you are, whatever your faith is, whatever you believe, I do feel like that can be an anchor for people, and especially the communities around those faiths as well. It can really help lift you.
Yeah, and that's also that community belonging as well.
Yeah. Wow, Krazi. I love all of that. And I want all of that for anyone who's listening. But I know that's a lot. So I guess maybe choose 2 or 3 things to start on.
Yeah. And I know it's a lot. And I just wanted to say I have a section on my website, which is personal resources. And I've done handouts on quite a lot of things that anyone can download. And one of them is exactly on that, recovery after an abusive relationship. And it's like a 7-page summary of pretty much the things we talked about now. So
perfect. What's your website again,
it's kirovapsychology.com.au, and it's in the resources, personal resources section. What is most important? I think if I have to pick, the rebuilding social connections is very important, and the embracing the freedom and power and starting to make decisions, because it kicks off everything else as well.
Isn't that wonderful?
And there is hope. There is lots of hope. I have seen incredible transformations. I have seen people come from horrible, horrible experiences, having been dragged through a legal system, all of that. And I have seen them thrive. One of my clients at age 69 started going online dating when the time came. Amazing transformation.
Now, Krazi, you don't really have much space for more patients, but you do have workshops.
Yes, I don't have the capacity to take on new clients, but I do have the workshops for women specifically, which are on understanding what is emotional abuse, but we also talk about exactly recovery, what are things you can do that help either if you're still in the relationship and you can't leave, or if you have left, how to deal with post-separation abuse and all of it. The next one is at the end of November. It's in Melbourne in person, but the details are also on my website.
Awesome. And I would love to have you on our member Q&A as well.
Absolutely.
To maybe answer some questions from our members and give them some support. But whoever's listening today, I really hope that this has given you some hope and a little bit of a scaffolding on how to pull yourself out of where you are right now. Mum, what would you like to embroider on a cushion?
I guess, but it's a process.
It's a process, but I think, again, process in the best of ways, because it's a journey. You start somewhere and you're getting somewhere, you're going somewhere, whereas what happened before was not a journey to anywhere. And now you're genuinely on a path that can take you many different places. You may not know exactly when or where you're going to get, but you are getting somewhere. And that's what I want to say.
I like it. So
I wonder if
maybe it's a journey, darling. It's a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah.
All right.
Krazi,
Thank you so much, Krazi.
I love your work.
Yes. Love you, and we love your work. Thank you so much for being on again. And we'll have you on again soon. Thanks, Mum.
Bye, Laura. Bye, everyone.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review, and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording